Can open them both up right out the bat.
Because it just would have.
Okay. Agenda.
I don't. There would have,
And Mike's not gonna be here, huh?
he would have had some of that too, because they kind of do that now. Divide that up. So it would have been, some funds, just because not that you had to. There's not really clear answer.
We got a minute.
Perfect.
Peter?
Now we got it right.
Which hat do you want?
We missed Eric. I saw him on TV tonight. Eric was on TV with
There's not a
guy
clear cut
that rained at the stabbing.
Oh, yeah.
as a pedestrian. A pedestrian means on foot, so almost like a bicyclist, really.
Like I said, unless you want to talk about handbook.
It's tough. I'll have to look into this.
I was reading through that and I thought that was a Roxanne special there, but.
Many of them know February 11th.
Aaron? Yeah. Gotcha.
Well, now that it is 6 o'clock, I'd like to first start by saying happy birthday to Alderman Brashaw.
Hey, birthday.
You should sing her happy birthday.
Well, if you'd like to start
No,
that,
thanks.
Tommy sings really well. He can do that at the end. And then also, Pastor Steve, would you please give us the invocation?
Hey, again, it's a major honor for me to be in the room with such amazing and influential people. It says in Proverbs 29:26 that many people seek the favor of the rulers, but man's justice only comes from the Lord. There's when I was in great leadership, one of the things that we were always persuading our managers to do was the vocal minority did not necessarily speak for the majority. And you're always going to have pressure from voices. The verse before that says the fear of man brings a snare. If you guys operate in righteousness and you understand where justice comes from, and you understand the gravity of with the calling that with you've been chosen, then there is always going to be an opportunity for the grace of God to lead you in the direction that you should go. So I'm going to pray those things over you. Father, I thank you so much for the incredible hearts and servant attitudes of these great men and women who are leading our region, this great city. We thank you so much that there is an opportunity right now, right here in this room, for every single one of the people that make decisions to yield to and rest in the grace that you are providing for them to make just and righteous decisions. Father, I thank you that there is a softness to their hearts and an openness to their ears to hear that direction from you. I pray these things now humbly in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. So now we'll officially call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons Clem,
Here.
McClanathan,
Here.
Ross is absent, Parker,
Here.
Busker,
Here.
Brashaw,
Here.
Keister is absent, and Berberay.
Here.
And if you could please stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Alderman Clem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Alderman Clem, the meeting's yours.
Thank you. Can we have an approval for the minutes of the Committee of the Whole on February 4th?
Actually, if you could back up one, we need
One
the
more,
approval of the agenda.
I'm sorry.
So moved.
Good.
Second.
Peter? Second? Somebody second it?
Sally did.
Okay, Sally did. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Now we'll go to number 5, the approval of the minutes. Approval of minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 4th, 2019.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. McClanathan and Brashaw, or McClanathan and Busker, one of the two. Public comments. Nobody has signed up for public comment, but Jim, what you have to do, which is not a problem, okay? Jim called me yesterday and talked to me about a trailer issue and about parking of trailers. And since we were on this, I asked him if he would come tonight just to talk a little bit about it and see where he's coming from. So if you could just go up to the podium, Jim, and your name, address.
My name is James Hohenstein. I live at 1407 Bulkenwood Drive. A few of you I'm familiar with. Mr. McClanathan, I did some work at your house this last summer. My issue here is the property, I understand, has been an issue over Southside Saw across from Ackman School. There's been a lot of, I can see Miss Mayor up there shaking her head. There's been some problems with the junk out there, and I've actually been helping Mr. Holden clear that out. I'm very close with him and his family. Now, I leave my trailer parked there in the winter when we have parking regulations and there's really nowhere else for me to feasibly stow it. I could put it at a storage place and pay $60 a month for storage, which I could just get rid of my trailer every year and buy a new one every year. That's not very feasible, and I don't think the DMV would like that. So what I'm proposing is, we come up with some solution that everybody can agree on as far as parking a trailer in an area where it's going to be out of the way but not visible to the public and a nuisance. Right now it's currently parked at Southside Saw. It is licensed through the state of Illinois. The tags are valid. I did them this last year when I bought it. And it's parked on a gravel parking lot that is a little torn up right now because we removed all the piles of firewood out there that you guys wanted gone. But it's parked in a gravel parking lot. It's out of the way. It's not just higgledy-piggledy all over the place. It's neatly parked in a corner. And there's a few other pieces of equipment out there that are, again, just low flatbed trailers, whatever. But it's a place of business. It's a commercial property that deals directly with the production of and sale of firewood and tree service. So I should have mentioned I do run a tree service, Quick Cuts Lawn and Tree Care. And, I haul a lot of wood. I need this trailer, and I really can't store it on my street. I don't know those of you that are familiar with Bulkenwood, but there's just not really an easy way to park on one side one day and the other side the other without getting in your neighbor's way. And until I expand my driveway, which is in the plans for this next 2 years, I really have no place to park it other than the graciousness of Eddie and him letting me use that little corner of his property. That's all I have.
Jim, we appreciate you coming forward and bringing this up. One of the things that Lowell just mentioned to me, that if you're basically parking on a commercial lot in a gravel parking place and it's licensed and it's insured, it's basically a safe place there. I appreciate you bringing up the other things. It does bring to our attention as we're coming forward with the truck things and the trailer things, that we all need to work together so we can clean up some things and have it done properly. I'm sure if there was a problem with your trailer, or it was mentioned at one time, it was probably due to the fact of the cleanup going on at that address. So we appreciate you coming forward and talking about it. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Item number
Chair,
7.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. I don't think we voted on the minutes. We did?
No.
Okay.
Did you hear?
We had a motion and a second. Did we have a vote, or did I miss that?
No, you didn't.
Okay,
We need a motion, we need a vote on the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we'll try and go into the item number 7, presentation and discussion regarding Capital Improvement Plan 2019, presented by Mr. Crow.
I'll use the mic at the stand here as we go forward. So this is, since we've approved the change in budget, this is actually your 2019B budget. So this will be, as we go forward here, this is the capital plan. Now, one of the things to consider as we go forward with the capital plan is the numbers, because this is only an 8-month budget, and you'll see it. Some of the numbers are lower. It'll look like the budgets, this is our first brief into the budget. The budget's a lot better than, just remember, you got to take it out to 12 months. So we'll start with the capital. So the first part is Public Works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through these things, and then if you have questions, I'm going to ask the department heads to speak up with this. So as part of the Public Works, Water and Sewer, we're continuing to pay off the Big Four, the Phase B, and the bonds. This is the bond payment that we have going out as part of the Public Works. This is coming out of Water and Sewer. And you can see we've run this out. You'll see 5 years. That's what a good capital plan has, is it has 5 years out as we go forward. So this deals with our fleet equipment and leasing. We're going to talk a little bit more on the large equipment. The leasing program is continuing forward. We replaced a large number of vehicles. We're going to do 4 additional vehicles this year. We've kind of spread them out because under the leasing program that we had, we were only going to do 1 vehicle next year. So we've spread those vehicles out. So we're doing more vehicles now. We have also are going to purchase in here in 19 the excavator, trailer, towable pump, and towable compressor. Those are products that we cannot typically lease as we go forward. We are leasing the mowers. We're looking at the backhoes. Caterpillar has a great lease program that they will actually give you a program, and my experience with them, they may actually replace it after 18 months. They look at when the best best time to sell it and when it comes out and when we can go forward. So that's one of the things we're going forward. We have 1 backhoe that needs to be replaced. We currently have 3 in inventory, and this will replace the old one, and it'll go to Water and Sewer, and we're going to move the Water and Sewer over to streets. So, all right, this is the water main replacement that we have scheduled. As we see, we have Float Street that is scheduled this year to finish out. That's a $1.3 million project. We've got the engineering, and we're gonna, the other projects we have scheduled. You'll ask, why is Demeter out there in 2020? It was interesting, we met with Jack, Kerry. We are being, there is a mussel, shellfish, freshwater mussel, that has been determined to be in the Yellow Creek. They have to, and it is an endangered species. So we are getting an IEPA review of that, and they have delayed the bidding on that project until they can make sure that there are not any endangered mussels underneath the Detmer Bridge. So the earliest we are now looking to even bid that out is the August letting, if they were, and that's if the clearance works well. We actually figure that we probably will not get clearance until August, if it is, and then the letting will be November. So we've had to move that out earlier, but the water main is part of that project. Anything else to add on that? Either Dennis or Tom? All right. And then we have phase 2. We'll take you through the different, as you can see, we have a large group that are replaced in phase 2 in 2020. South Street, Lincoln, Meadow, and Cleveland as we go out. So The reason why is the majority of the water and sewer is going to be going into the new wells as we go forward next year. Okay. All right. Some other water structures. So we've already got the test wells carryover. We're going to start into the new production facility, and as well as completing of the drilling of the wells in this year. That is a 3-year project. We're to finish the construction and production facilities at both Willow and Burchard. We're hoping to have those online late fiscal year 2020. Correct. Right? And so there'll be some carryover, some finishing. Included in those projects are the street up on Burchard, and as well as installation of sewer and water main up on those areas. So that Burchard, that's to, we can feed both the low and high side on that plant, and then the Willow production facility will be moving forward as well. That is really, the Willow well will be completed, but the plant itself will not start until fiscal year 2020. And anything else you want to add on that one?
No, you explained it just fine.
Okay. The Willow tank modification coating, the main storage tank up there at Willow, we'll start doing the engineering work on that. We're going to have to drain that tank and
Install a hatch close to ground level.
so we are going in from the top side and then redo the coating inside of it. You already approved the fire hydrant painting, and then the force main replacement, as you see, is out in the out years. We are doing some force main replacement with the float street, and one of the things is that'll be coming up that is also the Adams Street. As we do the street, both force main and water main will be replaced, and that's out in fiscal year 2022. SCADA improvements, we're going to, as we increase the water, upgrade the water plants, we're going to go to online cloud-based SCADA, which will allow our guys to have the ability to control the SCADA from their tablets. They will actually get tablets. Tom can be anywhere in the United States and look at controlling both the water and sewer plant and look at this and then get feedback. I had this system in Monmouth, and my water and sewer supervisor was was duck hunting outside of Kansas City, and he saw a pump go failure. They contacted him, and they shifted the pump while he was right there outside of Kansas City. So that's where we're going with this. And then digester cleaning, you've already approved as we move forward. So as you can see, we talked about the sanitary sewer float street, or Adam, is this coming up here. Adams is out in 2020 as part of the resurfacing. And then we have some lining. We're going to brief you on the manhole, first phase of the manhole rehabilitation here, but we've got manholes throughout the whole city that have an issue, and we're going to start discussion on that as we move forward. And storm sewers, I think everybody's aware of what we're going to be doing with the storm sewers. Dennis, do you want to add anything on storm sewers? Nope. All right. Anything else to add, Tom?
No, not at this time.
All right. Any questions?
Chair.
Yes. Alderman McLean.
A couple questions. We'll start right at the end and then go back to the beginning. Could you talk a little bit in regards to the SCADA? I know you talked about the tablets and stuff like that. I'm looking at the construction. We're budgeting around $510,000 over a period of time. What all goes into the cost of that?
Well, okay. What that is that there's the water plant, the wastewater plant, and the lift stations, and the SCADA system that we have had in place for the past 15, 20 years has been antiquated. There have been the hard devices as far as programmable logical controllers, and then the programming of these devices. Some of the stuff has not been looked at since the day it was installed. The hardware components have been discontinued, they're obsolete, there's no longer support on it. So we have to go and bring the items back to where they're starting to fail and it's replacing what we have. And then also with the advance in the industry, we have stuff that was really not thought of back 20 years ago. So what we're going to do is adapt to the current and then also make plans for the future.
And we were going to have to upgrade the SCADA as we build the new water treatment facility, because the new system is based upon a web-based that we're looking at Tonka. So that was going to be that's part of this project. So we're just going to upgrade the control for both wells. We're going to have to be upgraded as well as the water treatment facility. So we're just rolling the whole system into that. And I know Tom and Dennis have been out to look at the automated SCADA system. So,
If I could, Peter, which I think you know, but for the audience, just so you know, the SCADA system is a control system, basically that monitors everything and can make changes. I know we redid some when we did the tower, correct? That was all redone?
Well, that was yes, the tower, that was part of the big four. So it was meters, SCADA, the tower, and I believe water mains as well.
Just to follow up, so we knew, if you didn't know what that system was, that's basically what it is. Any more, Peter?
Yes.
Feel free, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So on the storm sewer side, looking at the breakdown of it, it looks like the intent is to take the high volume of the low and mid-level what projects, if you will, and address those rather than take those three, what you call the critical projects that are maybe more cost-intensive. So what are you trying to just get more bang for your buck here at the beginning, or?
right at the beginning, we're going to need to go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, so the intent behind this is there are quite a few projects that we can handle in-house. So we're going to use that funding to make sure we can acquire the equipment needed to take care of those. So in general, yes, getting more bang for our buck right out of the gates. And then we'll also have to have a little bit of design done to make sure that those larger projects are biddable. And so
the other thing is the new four-water storm doesn't go into effect until the 1st of May when the new addition goes on. So we need some, we can take care of those in-house. We really are looking at building up the revenues in that so we can address some of the larger projects in the out years. So that takes that into account as we look at this.
And further, going back to the water main replacements portion here, float obviously is going to basically be our main water main work for the rest of this year at 1.3 million. And then if someone's looking at this presentation, though, would it be fair to say you don't just take the 320,000 that you see on Demeter, but you also need to add in the cost that's on the first page for all those other South Street, Sylvan, Kiwanis, Meadow, Cleveland, Monroe, Jefferson, and then in the next year, Adams and Clinton, to get an accurate reading as to how much water mains we're going to be replacing in the next basically 2.5 years?
That's correct.
Okay.
And this is actually, this talks about our leasing program and purchase program as we are going forward. Dennis is going to do an additional briefing on this as we look at it. Our fleet of our large vehicles, we are looking at the best technology. Well, fleet vehicles we're leasing. We're looking, we've been looking at leasing the larger vehicles. Right now, no one is leasing in the market of the larger vehicles, and we're also looking at new technologies with hook trucks, which are multiple interchange beds. And what we're going to be doing is looking at financing those vehicles over the period. And those vehicles should be replaced about every 10 years. So we were going to finance them at either a 7 or a 10-year. Once we have determined the cost, we have a committee put together of those vehicles. We're going to go out and finance them. And this is replacing some vehicles that need to be replaced within the fleet.
Alderman Clem?
Yes.
Manager Crowe, could you please give for us new guys a description of phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and why they're spread out different fiscal years and what they mean roughly? Without going into such minutes.
Oh, what, as it relates to water main?
Well, water main, there's
Projects?
phase 2, 4, 5, 6, and then on water sewer storm, it's phase 1, phase 3, phase 1. I don't know the difference. Is it just a matter of funding allocation, or?
Well, one thing with it is that we have like a facilities plan for the water side, and that encompasses water mains that have to be done, the production wells that have to be drilled, the water treatment plants that have to be built and commissioned. So if we have all this work to do, it has to be staged in a certain order, so it all falls into place. So the first thing you have to do is drill the well. After the well is drilled, then you go and install the plant. And then, and in parallel to that, it's like the phase 2, which is a number of water mains, Cleveland and some other segments to go and loop, rather than just have all these dead ends, which you would want to have a loop system for fire flow control, and then an alternate path if you have to have a water main shut down to repair a break. So this is done in such a way as to, it's all falling in a certain logical, predictable path. So, and then also with the phases is that with the loan amount of money that we could get to where we want to sort of bundle certain projects in maybe a $2.2 million package. Because then if we're able to go and get roughly $1.5 million forgiveness, it's better to have maybe 4 $2.5 million projects than to have one $10 million project, because at the end of the day, the amount of forgiveness is going to be 75% of $2 million, which is $1.5 million.
And what, so right now, and one thing that Tom hasn't added, so right now in front of EPA is phase 1 permits and loan requirements. Phase 2, if we go down to, go back here, phase 2 will go in. We're with the permits here in 19 to begin work in 20, along with the loan application for that. Phase 3 will start the engineering work this year. We've already done the engineering work for phase 1. Phase 3, the engineering work will begin, and we can file the permits to finish. We've gotten the test well, so we can do the permits, and then we'll submit the permits for with IEPA, so we then can get the loan for phase 3. Okay. Thank you.
To Alderman Burberry, taking a step back, I think about the time you came on the council, or just before that, we had authorized Fair Graham to go ahead. This complete financing thing kind of changed around. Before it was big packages and there were big phases, and now with this forgiveness, it makes it a whole different situation. But everything has to be all engineered and everything else correct before we take it to the state, or so we take it to for funding. So that's basically the difference in it, where there's been a shift in it, if that helps.
And every time, so anytime you have to do, we do a standard replacement of both water and sewer main, and it's not an emergent repair. We also have to have an IEPA permit before we do that work. Okay. So that in order to do that work, we have to have it completely engineered before we go forward with that. Thank you all.
Chair?
Yes.
On the fleet equipment leased and then the bottom 3 purchased, what are our funding sources for that total page there?
So right now, that's coming out of the 2 cent per gallon gas tax. As we go forward, one of the and you'll see the police vehicles later on. You'll ask the same question. And those additional fire fees that we had talked about, that we had approved, will go towards those police vehicles. Some of this will be coming out of the cap, will come out of the general fund as we look at where we're making changes. Some of it will come out of that $2 gas tax for for this. Some of these vehicles are also being split between water and sewer as well as streets, so some of that money is also going to be transferred over from the water and sewer fund.
Okay. This might get into the next presentation, but when we're talking on purchases of vehicles and the lifespan that you're talking about, it's a more aggressive or shortened turnaround time than I think historically we've had, but on the other hand, as you'll probably present to us, that's also leading to some of the conditions that some of the fleet has. So how as the staff has been crafting this and trying to come to an appropriate timeline, did you balance those issues?
Well, so this winter, we've already lost one of our vehicles. We had the frame on the vehicle break, and that we had to take a vehicle out of service that we've already had. Our leaf, two of our leaf machines are already beyond usable life. We can't even get spare parts. We have to it's actually costing us more because we're having to get parts produced for them. So what we looked at is the vehicles that are already beyond its usable life. Now, one of the savings we've had is the restructuring that we're doing within water, sewer, and streets, combining them into a single department. What we've looked at as we've gone forward is the vehicles during the summer, the water and sewer department uses the vehicles primarily, and in the winter primarily streets do to clear snow. So what we're going to do is that our fleet's actually going to reduce in size in the number of vehicles that we have, which will be ultimately a long-term cost savings to us.
Sure.
Go ahead.
To follow up on that.
Sure.
So with the reduction in the fleets, the regular cost schedule through the leasing, you think that you'll be able to, but then also on the other hand, maybe a more shortened turnaround lifespan on some of these vehicles with reduced maintenance costs down the road. You believe that will generally be able to balance the amount of funds that we have coming in versus all the costs on the fleet side?
So the fleet leasing for our fleet, the projection is, in fact, I'll use an example. The Colorados, we have, what, 2 Colorados? 1 Colorado. We had sold the Colorado this year and then turned around and leased a replacement Colorado. The city would have actually gained $2,500 in value back. That would be money returned to us from enterprise that would actually be put either in our lease, reducing our lease costs, or be put towards the vehicles. By year 7, the leasing of our fleet vehicles it'll be zero. The other thing is your maintenance costs. What we're seeing is a decrease in maintenance costs. So with the fleet leasing, we have a fixed, before we were spending $55,000 to $60,000 a year to maintain those, because we have a fixed cost of our fleet leasing. That's a fixed cost of about $25,000, right, Dennis? It's for those.
I'm not sure on that cost. Right?
Okay, I know that was when we signed the contract, that was the ultimate fixed cost on the fleet leasing was $25,000. I just wanted to verify that's for the fleet leased vehicles.
And as we talked about at that time, one of the ideas was to be able to have a more modern fleet at the same or less cost. And,
That's
and
correct.
You still believe we're achieving that target?
We're still achieving that target.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, John.
thank you. Manager Crow, when I'm looking at this chart, I'm just a little bit confused. Now, I realize that some of the vehicles are leased and some are perhaps purchased. In the red, are those purchased vehicles that we're looking in the future years, or are those leased vehicles?
So when you say hook lift truck with leaf box, that is being purchased. The mowers are, the JD mower, remind me, we're gonna lease the one out at the airport, correct?
Yes, we're leasing that one.
We're gonna lease that one. The patch box is strictly a purchase. The UTV snow blower is a purchase, but everything above that building is all leased. What the red numbers are is that is basically where they're gonna fall for the out years.
I thank you for that explanation. I won't remember which is which, I'm sure, in the years to come, but I do know that you have to budget very carefully for this many vehicles. I guess my alarm is, when we're looking at, future year 2019, we're looking at the total of 142,895, and then we get 5 years out and we're up to 460,000. I feel just a little bit panicky. But
Well-
you're assured that we can still take that 2 cents and cover most of those costs?
Well, so what we're not programming into this is the return cost that we're getting from enterprise for the sale of vehicles, because we won't know that. So when you're looking at the building incorporated up, in year 2023 is when we start selling vehicles out of this list, and that money will return back into the city. So we're going to reduce that cost. However, we are going to have the tandem hook, the tandem trucks, the 5 yards. Those will be shared vehicles between water, sewer, and streets as we go forward. So some of the costs are split between water and sewer and streets. So that's some of that offset out there. But we're going to have to look at these out years at how we are going to have to come up with the money. We're going to have to. Your fleet is falling apart, council. Your fleet is falling apart, and it's dangerous. So we're going to have to schedule this, how we're going to do it out there, because it's the guys, they're maintaining the vehicles we are, but we have to find a way we can do it. And one of the things we're doing is looking at new technologies, the hook truck with the leaf box. So today, a tandem truck or a hook truck with a leaf box, or if you just want to buy brand new, is running you $150,000 or $200,000. So those trucks that they're running out there that are outfitted for snow plows are $200,000.
Follow-up.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to scold you, Manager Crowe.
Oh.
I realize this is a touchy subject in some ways, and we do need the safety of our personnel, and we need our city streets cleaned. I understand that. I'm just looking at future years for our financing. I don't want to use the word comfort because it's never comfortable, but just trying to do those planning for us as a council as well.
Well, and that's why that's why it's important. So the city, until we got here, never had a 5-year plan, never had a 5-year capital plan. It was whatever we could spend, whatever we could spend, that's what we bought. Now, so that's what we're trying to do, is look at what our actual costs, so you as a council can make decisions if we want to move things around, if we want to do something different. There was not really a fleet replacement plan as we go forward. The average truck will last 10 years is what the fleet.
15.
15? So 15 years. And I will tell you, we right now have trucks that are well over 15 years old. And I knew you weren't scolding me. I just want to make sure we're going to talk about the conditions of our fleet here in a little bit. So, all right. So these are other projects we have out there. The Pecatonica Perry Trail Path will be going on bid. Our match is split. That's the whole cost, including the federal money. The Fields of Freeport roads, those are the roads. The Fields of Freeport, so you hear that talk about, that's where our water treatment facility is. And the Arts Plaza is our portion of the grant going as we move forward. That was a guarantee that when the Arts Plaza was presented, that we're doing a lot of that as in-kind production to the Arts Plaza. We're doing rip-out installation of tearing out of the old parking lot, laying out some concrete work for them. So this is more of an in-kind cost to us. So these are the streets that we're planning to resurface. We're going to do so Woodside Drive, we were originally going to do a strip and lay back down. What's the term here?
We were originally going to do Colton Place recycling on this road, but due to the tree cover and the drainage issues, that was found to be an improper solution, so instead we're gonna do a cement stabilization subbase with a chip seal overlay.
And then Wild Oats, Wheatland Country are also scheduled, and then begin to work the Adams Street project as we move forward. We have Meadows scheduled and Hancock Bridge in 2020. Some additional work on Adams. So Adams Street is a STU, FTU project, federal funded project because of the type of road it is. And then we'll start the Hancock Bridge work. That's on the major bridge program, scheduled for 2023 release. That did move out a year. Hancock Bridge did not qualify for the 2022 program, but because of the work we're doing with the pre-disaster mitigation and some other conditions that are out there, and Willa Hoffman believes we can get it on believes it will be accepted into the 2023 federal bridge program.
Chair.
Go ahead.
Manager Crow, on those 2019s, are those contingents on bonding decisions by the council?
So the Woodside Drive and the Wild Oats project are based upon on the bond that will be coming up. So what we are asking, what I have been in conversation with Spear Financial, our financial advisor, and for what we gain, we'll be able to get $2.8 million of bond money for that $2 infrastructure fee that you changed. And what we're going to do is we're going to split. So that is the Wild Oats and Woodside projects, and then the Meadows, Dirk and Rosen Teal projects. They're scheduled in 2022 or in 2020. So those are the two projects. We'll get the money, and then we have additional reserve if we need money to go forward. So those are the big projects we have scheduled for those out of the bonding, and that'll give us about $800,000 to use for other projects as we go forward.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yes.
And you had Demeter on there, and we've talked about Demeter in
Right.
conjunction with Gladewood and also in addition to Gladewood, but we don't have a funding on that, or it's blank on there. What's the point on that one?
We don't want to move forward on Demeter and Gladewood until we know what's going to happen with the bridge.
Okay.
So that's the reason it's not there, is they're going to have to do some surfacing, extension of, it's called, is it Bridge Road? What's the, right there at the bridge. And so, because they're raising that bridge, we don't want to get ahead of them on that project.
Okay.
Manager Crowe, just a question. I don't know if it falls into here because of when we talk about Wild Oats or the other places. How about Navajo Drive? Where does it fit into the whole picture?
The road itself, or the detention pond?
The detention.
That sits in one of those storm sewer projects that was on the previous CIP.
Okay, thank you.
So, going down to the bottom line, remember, FY 2019 is on an 8-year or 8-month. We have almost $3.5 million of projects, and then out in FY 20, 4.6. Then we drop down into 2021 where we're at. And I always say the way you look at capital improvement projects, the 20 and 21 projects, you have them scheduled, and if they become emergent, you pull them forward and push another project back. But this is the 2022 and 2023 are always, I affectionately refer to them as funny money, because we can make adjustments in these projects as necessary and going out there, because these are not hard numbers where the 20 and 21, we have to start thinking about how we're going to finance these projects this year. That's why they're out there. But we schedule 5 years out so we can look at how we're going to stream our financing for all 5 years on the projects. That kind of gives you the streets as we go forward. As you know, the ones in red. And, oh, where'd your circles show up? There you go. So that's everything that's on the capital plan, is everything that's circled, from the water, sewers, and streets.
Mr. Chair,
That's just this year.
That's
Put it
just
again.
this year? And one more?
Mr. Chair.
What's that? Go
The
ahead.
worst roads, Manager Crowe, are they the red?
They are in the red. And you'll see that we have, how many of the reds that we have circled, and there is actually a red rectangle up there too, if you can't see it, that we have scheduled to be done over the next 5 years. And you'll also notice that we have it throughout, there's work being done throughout the wards with maybe the exception of Ward 4. I'm sorry, Don. All right. So, here, go into the capital plan. So what the fire department has, capital plans, they're looking at a new ladder truck. It's actually going to replace 2 different platforms here. Number one is I say ladder truck, but it's really a platform truck. And what we're looking at is Pierce has come out with a new platform truck. Hopefully I got the right picture up there, which are going away from the tandem engine. It's a lighter truck, does less damage, and actually has the same amount. Well, they have 2 pictures on their websites. That's why I wanted to make sure I picked the right one. And this is so popular right now is we've been looking to get a demonstrator model down here for the last 6 months, and every time they build a demonstrator model, it's sold to another community. So we haven't been able to actually look at it yet. We may have to go up to the factory, but it replaces both a standard engine as well as a platform truck, and is actually a reduced cost. These run in about the 1.3 to 1.4 million versus the 1.8 for the platform truck. We're also looking at an ambulance and a new training facility because we shut the one down. What we're going to propose, you'll see it, is purchase the property from Morris and build a new training facility as well as a facility to maintain both fire and police vehicles with the idea that the fire mechanics, we've had this discussion between the two Chief Todds and I about building a maintenance facility, and we maintain fire and police on through the mechanics from the fire department. So what we have here is what their fiscal year 8, the big things is we're continuing to pay the loans out, outdoor, and then transfer to corporate. This is what we've been transferring basically to with the change for 8 months. With the increased fees, we were going to get a total of $750,000. But as we talked about, you'll see the new apparatus is scheduled in 2020. And I don't, Deputy Chief, it takes, if I'm wrong, remind me, it takes about a year to produce one of these vehicles. So we have to tell them ahead a year out, but we have to put down the first down payment. But it's because of the expense, we've bonded for those aerials. Ours is beyond its usable life. They're starting to have hydraulic issues with it and maintaining it. So, but it's getting a lot of use. So, and then one of the things that we've gone into is putting the standard hose replacement, turnout gear, and radio replacement. This was something, so we got ourselves up to where we needed to be last year, and now this is just getting a standard cycling through and replacing the gear on a regular basis every year. So we're constantly turnover, and this is good best practices as we move forward. So, okay, well, I put the fire the building on the police one. So are there any questions on this capital plan?
Chair? Remind me what the SCBA's are?
SCBA's are the breathing, breathing apparatus.
Okay.
So, sorry, I'm trained as an SCBA guy from the military. All right.
I suppose Manager Crow, my only comment on the 5446 would be, well, I got to see the rest of the picture.
Yep. Well, this is based upon, so what we've found is our revenue has actually gone up a little bit, and this is based upon the new fees that we had plugged in, our estimated of what our increase those fees will result in. So, and that was strictly based upon what the 405, but like you said, as we see the rest of the picture, we'll determine how much we need to transfer. So this is what the police department capital plan, with the trucks, for the sergeants, SUVs. So both Ford and GM have stopped producing police cars. The only one that's producing is Dodge, right?
Yep, Dodge.
And the Dodge Darts, with all the equipment that we've moved into them, have become basically other departments that have gone to them. The police officers are starting to have knee problems because of the equipment that's in there. And I'll give Todd Barklow, Chief Barklow, credit. A lot of the best practices that my ICMA recommends, he's already adopted. And that's moving the equipment so the guys do not have to come in and make their reports in the office. They keep it in the field and they carry the equipment to make the reports in the field. But that does also make the vehicles much more crowded. So the SUVs are where both the and it's the Ford SUVs, right?
Yep.
So you want to comment a little bit on that?
Yes, if you want to go to the next slide, it kind of lays this out just a little bit. And just of habit, I put fiscal year 1920 and 2021, so it's just the 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. It, most of you are well aware that we buy our squad cars, and Manager Crow is right. Right now, we're going with the Ford sedan. Well, Ford is are phasing out the sedans portion of that. In 19, we're going to be able to get a sedan. They're going to production, but after that, they're going to phase those out. 20, we anticipate there still may be some sedans left, but after that, we're going to be going pretty much all to the SUV, the smaller SUV, mid-size SUV, not the Escape. It'd be like the Explorer. Yeah, the Explorer style, not the Expedition, and some of the bigger ones. So, both our K9s right now are the Explorer SUV, and that's basically what we're going to be going to in a couple years. We're going to be transitioning out of those. With the Fords, we've figured that we can get 3 years service out of our Ford. And that is the on the street marked police work, that running 24/7. Those cars, we put about 20,000 miles on a year. We can get 3 years out of that. Then we, as I've described before, we take that we peel off the striping, and we use those in a light duty situation. We use them for detective car, administrative cars, travel cars. We rotate those out. So we typically get, depends on each car. Some cars seem to run better than others, but we typically get 5 to 6 years out of those cars before we end up trading those out as we start to get more cars in. Now this in 19, I'd like to say that is because we're all team players and we want to do what we can, and that is the case. But it just so happens that we need 3 cars in 19 instead of typically the 4 cars. And about every 3 years, the math works out like that, And so that's why you see that 109 is quite a bit less than some of those other ones.
So one of the things we also looked at very carefully to have Enterprise quote us the leasing based upon the amount of miles that we're putting on the vehicle and the layout. They were not comfortable. So what we did was they have two other communities that are currently leasing the SUVs, which was what we would have to have gone to. And the average leasing plus outfit ran each SUV in the area of about $70,000. So and the return based upon the mileage we were getting would actually require us to trade the SUVs out every 2 years. And from a financial standpoint, it was not doable. Now, they only have 12 communities that are currently leasing. So where they've done the fleet leasing for Public Works very carefully, this is a new program for them, and we're going to watch how it develops. And so maybe when we get out once the SUVs are all online, the program will be better developed.
Sure.
So go back to so one of the things is the Fire Improvement Fund. As we go forward, one of the things we're doing is the training building and Morse Group and the replacement of 2003 the ambulance. So that is the training facility as well as the maintenance facility for the fire and police as we go forward. As you know, our training facility, we have a short-term agreement with the sale of the old fire station. When we had talked about that, there was some discussion about us. Morris has that large area next to the fire station, and that's what we thought we'd go forward and have. If we can reach an agreement with them, purchase that, and then in the future build the new building. As we're going forward, what it would require in the fire department is they currently have 2 mechanics, and if we went to this route, it would require us to upgrade one of the other firemen to a 3rd mechanic. And we looked at the numbers on this, and it would allow for maintenance of those vehicles going forward. So this is strictly in the looking at phase right now. We really haven't had a good discussion with Morris about the purchase of the property. Some of the council members have reached out to me and said they would be amenable to selling that property to us for the development. We haven't gone out and formally contacted them yet. So the last portion of this IT improvement plan is the financial software. I will tell you, and Kurt will come up here, and I'll have Randy too. The financial software is finally, I know we've been talking about, it is dead. Kurt is spending, how much time are you spending on the financial software? Just to maintain the current, and it does not get us the reports we need to go forward. It does not talk to our upgrade to Neptune. We're in the process of upgrading Neptune so that eventually, and we're talking with also U.S. Bank. Neptune is your reading system on your water meters. We're also talking to U.S. Bank to automate the paying system and bring on new technology. This software that we currently have doesn't talk to any of them. The new Neptune system will actually have an app on your phone where you can see water usage, you can get alerts, and so when you have extensive water usage, and the new system we're looking at, we want to go forward is integrates everything across the board. And Randy had several quotes in last year. We're going to go refresh those quotes and contact. I think we've identified the ones we like and the ones we don't, and this is what we've programmed into it. And then the $30,000 refresh. The actual number as we ran it today is about it's a little bit less than this. It's about $24,500, but this was our initial stab. And that will upgrade Your computers need to be thought about as similar to cars. We need to replace them every 4 to 5 years because it just software gets out of date. It's no longer maintained. An example is Windows 7, for those that are running
Yes.
Windows 7, will no longer be supported by Microsoft as of next year. So that makes it vulnerable to attack. Kurt, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, hardware and software, you gotta keep them up to date or you're a huge security risk. And I don't know if you've read the news, but it gets a lot more costly if you don't than if you just keep it up to date.
So that's that is the capital plan, and I can go back. I think we talked about each area and ask questions. This is the first run through the capital plan. This is the rough. We're going to start showing you the budget. My goal is to, once we have the real budget numbers put together, is refine this further, bring it back to you for approval in March. But we need, the capital plan is where your big money is, so we need to make sure that we're good to go, have a basis to start, and we're here to answer any questions and make adjustments as necessary.
Council, anybody have any questions for Manager Crowe at this point?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't see it in here, but I was just curious with the transferring everybody, moving around, combining departments and whatnot. Is there any discussion further on about a new public works facility for similar to like what the county's got or the park district has going forward to have a better place to store these new vehicles that we're leasing and buying and taking care of all that stuff? Is that something in the works later on, or?
We have not programmed in that we've had some discussions between us, but we have not programmed in there because we feel that the vehicle replacement should be the primary focus. Get those vehicles replaced. We have the ability to store in the vehicles. We have talked about what would be our dream building out there, but we believe our current building meets the requirements as we go forward. And do you want add anything to that, Dennis? Nope. Anything, Tom?
No, not at this time.
All right. So you are getting a new water and 2 new water plants out of this that are part of that. There won't be any of the maintenance vehicles there, but there will be some of the vehicles stored at that place, at those 2 locations.
Chair?
Yes, Alderman McLaren.
Thank you. Outside of the finance software and the IT component, the last page there, the majority of these other projects are all funded by various either dedicated sources, grant fundings, and things of that nature, as opposed to other, what I'll call general revenue sources. Is that accurate?
It is. It's very. The one is the vehicles. We're still working at how the vehicles. We have the $2. It's in those out years. What comes out of water and sewer, and what comes out of the if we have to add any additional money out of the general fund for those.
Okay.
Any other questions? So like Manager Crowe said, this is our first look at this, so we can muddle through it, ask any questions as we need. And then as you discussed at the last meeting, I believe, Manager Crowe and Alderman McClanathan, we'll start doing some budget meetings at the start of the regular meetings?
That's correct. So the first 2 budget meetings of this capital plan and the vehicle plan as we go forward, that kind of lays the groundwork on the capital side. And then starting at 5 o'clock next week, we'll have budget meetings as we go forward at all the meetings. So be at 5 and we'll start talking money.
So would we like to move while you're right there on your heavy equipment?
Move right into heavy. That's
number
actually,
8.
Dennis is going to be given the heavy equipment.
Is there anything you need from us?
Not at this time. This is strictly to start the discussion as we go forward. We did get, it was good feedback from you as we go forward, and I will bring up the fleet condition brief. All right, so Dennis. How do you expand?
It says, as Lowell had said, the fleet is dying. That is a very solid point. The point will be only emphasized in the very last slide. So when he tasked me with kind of giving you guys a conditional update for the fleet, I was looking more at pictures, years, just so that way you guys are all kind of aware of what we have out there. This doesn't cover all of our machinery, but it does cover our 5 and 10 yard trucks as well as our leaf machines. So called around to a couple different manufacturers, and they're letting me know that their current trucks, they are building our 15-year trucks. They emphasize 15-year truck multiple times in these conversations. Current leaf machines that we have and the new ones being built are this 12 to 15 year range. So then when we start to look through, so our 5 and 10 yard fleet, as you can kind of see up here, here's our 11 current plow routes. So each one of those routes has a different driver, and each one of those has a 5-yard truck they're assigned to it. Along with these 11 trucks, there are also 2 tandems that we have on the main line road. So Galena, so we got Galena, Adams, West Street, stuff like that. They can take care of it a little bit easier with their larger salt supplies and the wider roads. So on top of that, we also have 2 5-yard trucks currently with the water and sewer division, as well as 2 tandems. The 2 5-yard trucks are mainly used for the hot mix asphalt and the patching in the summer for them. And then the tandems are their go-to vehicles for the water main breaks. They haul all their rock and all of their material.
One thing to add about that is the water and sewer trucks are currently not outfitted for snow plowing. They don't have the wing plows, and we are looking at what the cost would be to modify those.
So these are all of our 5-yard trucks currently. The water and sewer trucks are the 2 without the S. They're just the number 4 and number 5. So they're currently a 1991, 1996. One of those is a stick shift, I believe, currently.
Yes, that's correct. That's the 1991, and the reason why we have them to be that old is because they don't carry salt in the wintertime.
Yep. And as you can see, we have 4 1998s. The one that struck through that actually had the least amount of miles on it is the one that has the cracked frame. So that's the one that has been taken outside of service. You can kind of see, I think, Tom, you were probably on the council for quite a few of these purchases. You can see the city was making a good effort of purchasing 1 or 2 a year for quite some time, and then that has kind of died off.
Just to give you an idea, you mentioned the time. The whole first row there, up to 2004 is before I was on the council, and that's 14 years ago. So that puts, you can take a look at some of the ages of them. And the mileage, like you say, the mileage is not necessarily the factor on it.
Nope, there's a lot of idle time, and there's just a lot of snow time. I mean, most of these miles are hard-earned miles. I mean, they're not our standard, you get on a highway and drive 65 and head over to Rockford kind of miles. So the next one, we've got our 4 tandem trucks. Bottom 2, the 2002 and 2003, are the water and sewer division trucks. As the other 2, which are in a lot poor condition, I would say, just because of the snow plowing involved. And then we've got the 2 forestry equipment pieces, the 2002 clam truck. That's the one that we just had to have a bunch of the hydraulics taken care of this year. Usually once the hydraulics start to go, the truck is sure to follow. And then on the far right, we've got our 4 leaf machines. So You can kind of start to see some of the ages starting to really pan out on some of our equipment here. So then I've just got some pictures, so you can kind of see the 91 and on the left and the 96 here on the right. I mean, the beds themselves are in pretty good shape just because of the lack of having to have salt in them. Here's the tandems for the water and sewer side. Those are actually new bodies this year.
Right, about a year old.
Yeah, so the bodies are about a year old. The trucks itself are in pretty good shape, despite their age. A lot of that, again, is also due because they are not out in the salt, throwing the salt, pushing the snow. So here are 4 98s. The one on the right is the one that has the broken frame, so it has been taken out of commission. We're currently salvaging it for parts for the other 3. So that way, at least the repair on these get cheaper. None of these have wing plows. We didn't start purchasing wing plows until, I want to say like 98. I had those on the first page. But the wing plow really speeds up the amount of time it takes to actually clear the street, because instead of just having the plow in front, you've got the plow plus an additional several feet. So then our next oldest truck is our clam truck. This is the one that we just had the hydraulics replaced on it.
And this, excuse me for and this one would also be, the clam truck would be the one that you use mostly for demolition, to pick up stuff?
Yes, this one's used at every single one of our tree removals, as well as anytime we have to go pick up like a wet mattress or anything on the side of the road, or anytime nuisance would call us. This was used for most of our demolitions as well. The fire department actually asked us to come in for one of the last fires, but we can't reach quite far enough. I think it has about a 20-foot reach, and that you have to be right up next to it. So it didn't give much assistance there. So then we've got our 2004s. We've got the tandem on the left, and then the single on the right. The beds, a lot of the beds, I mean, you can kind of see in those spreaders how much painting and rusting those we've had to do on some of those back spreaders. The one on the left actually has a wing, but it's on the other side. Both of our tandems have wings, so that way they can assist a little bit better on the main routes. So then we had one purchased in 2005 and 2006. This is the second tailgate on the one on the left. This was actually some work by a previous mechanic to re-strengthen that back tailgate. We had some holes in it, and so the idea was to just weld a sheet of steel across. So then the next oldest ones we've got are our leaf machines. As you can kind of see, they're beginning to show some wear and tear from the industry people. I know they're always trying to sell equipment, but usually the things that start to run out on these are your blades and your fans and the inside casings around your fans due to all the friction. As Lowell was saying, some of the most difficult parts are trying to get those fan blades themselves. You actually have to, instead of calling our own supplier, we actually have to contact Dinkmar and then request these specifically, and they'll only make them in packages of 2. And then once you actually get them purchased, then you have to send them off to a steel fabricator to get them balanced. And then if they are currently balanced, once they go on your machine, then they're good to go. If you put them on your machine and they're not balanced, then they go back and it keeps going. So it's a decently long process from the beginning to the end to get new blades put on them. So I didn't go to most of the newer stuff because it's all younger than 15. But this is the remainder of the snow fleet. So the Polaris we use on the sidewalks and the bike path. We use it around downtown quite a bit. And then the one in the middle on the top is one of the lease vehicles. We didn't get those with salt spreaders, but we do have plows on them. The one on the right is our cemetery truck. It does have a salt spreader, so that's one that we can actually salt the alleys with when we do that. The 3 loaders on the bottom range anywhere from a 93 to a 2005, I think. So a few of those are starting to show their age as well. So we've been kind of talking about right sizing. So kind of going through it. We do have a committee set up between both me, Tom, and then some of the ASME members to confirm that this is the right size for the fleet and the right trucks, because we don't want to purchase a truck that's not what it should be. So we're taking a good hard look at that. But as you can see, the number of trucks has shrunk. The number of leaf machines is not. I mean, as everybody kind of speak for this year, I mean, we need about as many leaf vacuums as we possibly can.
One of the things we are looking at is the new model is the two-man crew. Trucks currently, our crews are three-man crews for the leaf machines. One is the towable. We're looking at a combination of hook leaf lift 15 yards, which they've already demonstrated down there, and some of our guys have operated. This is they hook up a leaf box and bring it in, and then a 30-yard towable vacuum that's towed behind our 1 tons. That would be a combination of those. The nice thing on the 30 yards is we can get about our current one's about 6 yards.
Yep.
So this is about eight times or 7 times the amount of volume. So we can keep them operating longer out there as we go away from the change out of trucks that change out.
Yeah, it's about 5 to 6 times.
Yeah.
And the current 3-man crew is 1 leaf machine and then 2 5-yard trucks. So each of the 5-yard trucks has a Kodiak leaf box in the back that sits just inside the box and is a little bit longer, and so they kind of range between that 5 and 6 yards on the. So I added this last slide a couple minutes before council because I started to think about where we were going to be at as we start to switch out. So if we switch out 1 truck a year, I mean, as you can kind of see the ages there on the left side, currently sit about 21 years. It's a 15-year truck. Right now we're getting 20, 21 out of it. So if we were to just switch out 1 truck a year, kind of leave ourselves in that hoping range that nothing breaks down. So our mechanics is going to stay pretty busy for the next 18 years. And then on the right side, I've got the vacuums. If we were to switch out 1 vacuum a year for the next few years, we're sitting there right there at the top of the life cycle for those vacuums as well.
Dennis, could we actually, on the vacuums, I mean, the way it looks and the condition they're in, can you get by with 1? I mean, 1 replacement next year? I mean, you're gonna have the same number of leaves and the same number of people mad. You know.
So last year, one of the big issues we had is that 1 had failed.
Right.
And so we were currently riding with 3 for that. So subbing out the one that is broken down for the one that is new, I think would put us right back into at least hopefully keeping up.
Okay. Anything else, Dennis, or?
I mean, I don't have any more good news.
Okay. Any questions for Dennis? Yes, sir.
Yes, Director. How's the Polaris holding up?
It's doing pretty good. We had to take it into the shop to get a couple adjustments made. It got sent to us in a shipping mode, so the horsepower is like cut in half the last few years. And it wasn't until this year that our mechanic actually sent it to Woodstock, Illinois, where we purchased it, and they took care of that for us. So it's running pretty well. It does have a hard time once we get those back-to-back big storms. It doesn't have the power to push the snow off of the areas like our big plows do. So that's why we were kind of pushing that snow blower into the CIP. That'll allow us to get down the bike path a little bit easier and push that snow farther out.
Follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
The snow thrower, what are you gonna attach that to again?
That goes on the Polaris.
On the Polaris?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. PTO or hydraulic?
I think so. I believe it is. I believe it's a PTO.
PTO? Okay.
he was doing fantastic out by Highland today on it. I can tell you that. Was
Yeah, I
really
mean, that
working good.
3/4 of an inch of snow is pretty easy to push around. It looks great in the small stuff.
Yeah. Any other questions? Only thing I'd like to add is, as Lowell and Dennis mentioned, you know, one of the things that we forget about, and the lady that presented from Enterprise, I think, did a fantastic job of kind of reminding you of this, is keep in mind those 97 or 98, 99, 2000 trucks don't have any of the safety features on them that the stuff has today. I can remember when we did the pickups, if I'm not mistaken, one of them didn't have an airbag in it.
There were more than, because the airbags actually came in 2007, 2006.
There was one that didn't have a floor in it.
But I mean, you know, if you look at this, they've been around, I appreciate you guys looking to it and into it, but the big thing is have a committee so you can move forward, and the guys know what kind of shape these are in, you know. That's the important part of that, but if there's no other questions, we'll move on and learn all about the employee handbook.
It's
Rehabilitation of manholes
Yeah.
covers. Manholes.
Okay, good evening. So you have the presentation here as it relates to something I'm going to have in front of the council next week, which will be look to gain the acceptance of a quote from RMS Services. But the discussion that's going to be here today is some of the work that's going to be done over at the Freeport Golf Club, south of that, Craig Park, north of that, Ridgefield, and parts of Pearl City Road. And with the city, the sewer system, we have approximately 115 miles of sewer main, roughly 24 to 2,500 manhole structures, and over time, they need rehabilitation with the product that goes through them. Hydrogen sulfide gas is a constituent of the wastewater to where it etches steel, eats concrete and such. So I've had RMS to do 3 surveys. First one was about 50 manholes, second one was 50, third one was about 100. And this is just one of the slides. And it shows that we've had the investigation done throughout all parts of the city, but what I did was, with these first few, I've had my staff who've been here 10, 15 years or longer, where are the structures that you get called to the most? Which ones are problematic? Which ones do we have to deal with on a quarterly, annual basis, something like that? And they generated a list for me to then look for RMS to go and investigate. So that's just some of that. And here's another slide from another investigation. And what I'm looking to go and discuss and communicate on out is a number of structures that are close to the park, the Freeport Golf Club and such. And if you go and take a look, to go and read the legend, you see red and orange circles there. Red is to where it's at a point to where something really needs to be done within the next year. Orange, it's something that can be deferred for maybe 1 to 3 years, but one thing with it, it's not going to get better, it's only going to go degrade worse. When you're in yellow, it's maybe a 5 to 7 year, and green, you know, it's probably 10 years down the road. Now this next slide shows that there's a total of 19 structures, and basically I think 16 of them or 15 of them are red, where it's critical that they need to go and be rehabilitated, but then the orange ones are at the point to where if we're going to have to go and get those others there, it just makes sense to go and get these as well. And the reason for that is that the line that runs west from Pearl City Road, Empire, and then south down Ridgefield through the golf course and through the park is something that'll need to be done. And I basically want to focus on that structure there, which is 1688. And what this slide shows that this is when it's put on in, it's a solid structure, smooth all the way on out, and it's able to go and handle flow. That sewer main has been installed roughly in the mid to late 60s. And if you go and take a look, this is on the number 10 fairway, I believe.
So just, we've had some complaints from the Freeport Club because the area along the 10th fairway is we're getting sinkholes, and we believe that it's being caused by this manhole.
So when it was installed, it was nice and smooth, but the hydrogen sulfide gas that's in the wastewater has gone and vaporized, and it's eaten through the concrete, and you could basically see the aggregate. So it's not structurally sound. And here's another one that's showing up there to where you could go and see the rebar, where it's eaten through you know, the thickness of the concrete, and now you're seeing the rebar. So that is imminent of where it looks to go and fail. So to go and, you know, how do we go and correct this? So RMS is a firm out of Crystal Lake, and they go and do manhole structure investigations. It's with the NASCO certification, which is an industry recognized standard. They take a digital camera, drop it on down, they bring it on up, and it shoots the images, and it also can pinpoint details as to what looks to be fixed. So they come up with a deliverable to me as to what needs to be done. And in this proposal, which will be before you next week, I'm looking to go and get 45 structures done. And the way that will go and take place, they will come on in, clean, descale it. There will be grouting and patching to where they will look to go and seal any holes that need to be sealed. If there's bricks that have been knocked loose from the sidewall, they'll look to go and replace it. And then some of them will receive a lining where they will go and take this product that they have, and they will go and spray it to a depth of a minimum of 1 inch to where it will be back structurally sound, and we'll look to go and get another 50 years worth of use out of it. Now, with the structures being on the golf course, and with the golf course being not in service right now, now's the opportune time, because within the last month we've had the cold weather to where we've had the frost come on in, harden, and the firm will have a rig to mix up the chemical to then do the repairs and do that lining. So the lining, it's basically that tripod. Their rig is roughly 100 foot away. There is just that one structure on the fairway where it will be, the rig will be off into the rough. There's still that storm sewer work over on Ridgefield that the restoration from that still has to go and take place. So I'm looking to have this to go and take place, and the memo as to the cost will be at next week's meeting. And here's a sample of what they've done in the city for right now, previously. So there was the before. It was in need of repair. It was cleaned up, and then afterwards shows what it looks like after they lined it. I've been in contact with the golf club, made them aware of it. I've got a meeting with the park district tomorrow, and am looking to communicate this on out since I feel it's necessary to keep you informed.
So, some things, so we've gotten some questions from us. So Todd Wiggins is responsible for the maintenance of at the Freeport Club. He does have some questions and he does have some concerns as he's expressed to us. And one of the things I've had a discussion with Tom is particularly the one on the 10th fairway. It's literally, we were out there, Dennis and I and Tom, the three of us were out there. It sits dead center in the fairway. The Freeport Club has asked us as we go forward to do the full restoration of the fairway back into the condition to play it as we play the course as we go in. There's some additional requirements there. We're with this lighter weather. One of the things I talked with Tom is we have to do full bypass on these, and one of the things we're gonna have to talk about is the damage to the course as we go forward. Understand that this is important to get done, but the discussion I had today with Dennis is that because the low, with this temperature over the next couple of weeks, this may become a marshy area. I am concerned about that, and I've expressed that concern with Tom that unless we can guarantee that this area is frozen, that I don't want to get a truck bogged down on the 10th fairway on the Freeport Club, because they already have events booked in for next year, and we may have to postpone this, and it's included in the bid to postpone this until next winter. The other thing is, this is correct me if I'm wrong, this is the heaviest flow sewer within the city. It counts for about 30% of our flow, right?
Well, it's probably 40–45%, because there's two stations.
So I was underestimating it, so, yeah. So we're gonna have to, so we have to, the best time to do it is during the winter months.
Mr.
Correct.
Chair.
Tom, if I could, okay, explain to me, if you would, how a manhole is going to cause all the problems that it causes on the fairway and all that kind of stuff. To me, tell me if I'm wrong, but a manhole is an access to get down into your sewer system, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I can see, in looking at those, I would understand it more for the safety end and more for some other ends, but tell me when that would be full of water or anything that it would, when we have a flood, it'd naturally be full of water, but explain to me a little more if you would, okay?
Well, okay, with the manhole, what the flow, say it comes from the north, it comes through these manholes. Now, if that structure collapses because the structural integrity is not there, the sides will go and collapse, and then you're not able to go and have the path of the wastewater to flow through there, which then would rise to the top and then go across the fairway or other land structures. So then,
What he's talking about is right now, because one of the things your discussion with Todd Wiggins is the issue that on the email you showed me is that we've had a discussion with Todd, is that the gushers may be causing some of their problems based along the 10th fairway.
correct. Oh, okay. Let's see. In the past, they've noticed that there have been sinkholes that have taken place, and water and sewer has gone and filled in those sinkholes, but then they go and reappear. So when we had RMS do the Class 2 investigation on these structures, they noticed what was called a gusher, where there's probably in excess of 25 gallons per minute coming on into the manhole from outside the manhole, not through the pipe. So there is a route to where the soil is being undermined around the structure, coming on in and then going on down the line to where you know, you're having sinkholes on the ground for one, but then with the condition of like the hydrogen sulfide gas eating away at the concrete, you're having that structure be less, you know, you're losing the integrity to where at some point it could collapse.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tom?
Yes.
Go ahead, Art.
Director, what is the inlet and the outlet size? Because the water is supposed to pass through, correct?
Correct. Well, and one thing with it is that, like at that structure, which is on the fairway, or just above that one, the one at 1688, the one directly north of that, it comes in probably about 3 foot from the top of the lid, and then it exits about maybe 9 foot down. So there's quite a change in elevation. So it comes on in, drops on down, and then it goes on its way. So and many other manholes, when it comes on in, it's just barely perceptibly noticed to where it's a little bit lower. The manholes, or the flows via gravity.
Yeah, but what is the size of the
That's 12-inch, I believe.
12-inch? Does it go into a drain field or just?
Oh, it goes on down the line and makes its way to the interceptor sewer, which then makes its way to Hancock. And there's 2 lift stations from the one over by Highland College, which is called the campus lift station. Then there's also the lift station at Laurel and Park, which is the park lift station. So all the flows from that general area come on in, and then they meet over on Ridgefield, and then they travel through the golf course, through the park, south, and then east over to Hancock.
So using this, you think this should remedy the problem?
Yes, you know, for that area there. Now I've only had about 200 of these manholes investigated with this Class 2 investigation, which there's like 24 to 2,500. So I'm in the early process of investigating the soundness of the structures throughout the city. Some of the others that are going to be also done, there's going to be 45 on this proposal. 19 of them are on Pearl City Road, Ridgefield, the golf course, and the park. So the others, there's some over by the river. Since we have an issue with water coming on in to the you know, rainwater, flood water coming on in, and with what the staff has told me that here, these are the ones that are most problematic. So we went and had them looked at. The results came back is that these certain structures need something done to them, and we're just, you know, looking to go and get that done. Also, with the proposed budget coming on up, I'm also going to look to go to, let's see, Galena, 26 South, I mean, all the major roadways, because that is another item to where I'm looking to go and minimize
Any
you know,
future
issues.
problems?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Brascia.
thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thanks a lot. From what I understand there, Tom, the infiltration is what is causing the problems, like we've had in other things with our sewer infrastructure in the past. And so this extra water's going on and it's aging these structures faster than it should. Is that correct?
Well, the rainwater is, you know, really not that toxic of a substance as compared to sanitary wastewater. So rainwater does not really, you know, do damage to the pipe. It impacts the treatment plant more. But the wastewater that gets flushed down the toilets or down the sinks, over time, the toxicity of that, you know, does cause, you know, hydrogen sulfide is part of the wastewater to where it, when it becomes a vapor, it eats concrete, etches steel, and that's what causes our problems.
So where we're having issues with the infiltration is
when we get a large rain, basically in excess of what, 1.5 inches, we get a large amount of infiltration, and it requires us to bypass or requires us to change how we're treating the facility. So we're having to so that's the impact. Our plant, we normally, on a normal basis, treat about, what, 6 million gallons?
Right, we normally treat 5.5, 6 million. It's designed to handle 6.75 million, but when we have these large rain events, we'll have 18 million coming through the plant, but then we're also bypassing before the plant straight to the river. So, you know, we have a lot of openings, and, you know, the way design was to lay sewer lateral is that you would just go and, you know, lay pipe against pipe, but you would not really seal it, because the thought back then was that, well, rainwater will dilute pollution. Well, but if you bring it to the plant, you've got your premature wear on the equipment, increased electrical cost, chemical cost, labor cost. So, you know, why should we run rainwater through a treatment plant? It's better for it to percolate to the ground.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. One of the things that you didn't really expound on, but I found absolutely fascinating, was the geocrete business and their geocrete geopolymer that they use to line these manholes with. I have a couple sons that are engineers, and so I have that engineering aptitude also, that I know that this is a worldwide solution that they've been using. And since 1991, they say they've sold like over 75 million pounds of this lining. And European countries are using it. America's lining their manhole covers with this as well, because it's not as gas permeable for the type of gases that you're speaking of, so it doesn't break down as quickly. They say that it actually adds up to 50 or more years to the lining.
Correct.
So probably even longer than some of these manholes have been in existence.
Oh, correct. And I have a sample, but I left it in the car. You know, forgot to bring it on in, but I've got a sample of it.
And I have one more question.
Sure.
I was looking at this RMS utility service that you have this whole spiel is from. Is this a specialized utility service that does this lining, and are there any other type of lining services that also use this geocrete polymer compound, or is this like a one company that's very specialized, the only kind of company that would do this kind of work?
Well, now RMS, they, you know, the owner's an engineer. They do design work. They sell products. They also have a service company, the division RMS. The main company is Midwest Water Group, and what it is that there's other firms that use this stuff, and they also do sewer lining. You know, they do manhole structures. There's another item that they do, what's called smoke testing, is to where you introduce smoke into the manholes through a certain point or between 2 points, and then you're able to go and see where it rises to where, okay, there may be a break there, or does someone have their gutters tied on in? So it's, you know, well-rounded firm. I've used them in my previous community, and they've always provided, you know, good service for what I've had to call them on for.
And will you be, if we go with this company and go with the bids, are we looking at the McHenry or the Crystal Lake division?
They originally were in McHenry, and within the last quarter, they've moved over to Crystal Lake. They're an ever-expanding company, so they needed a larger space.
Thank you.
Anything else for Director? Okay, thank you very much, Tom. We will need a vote, though, I believe, to take this to, or you're just going to bring it in at the next? Okay, this is informational. You'll bring it in at the...
We wanted to make sure that you're aware of it for informational, because of not only because of the impact the Freeport Club, and as we go forward, as well as because it's our plan, as part of the capital plan that's in there to do over the next several years.
Tom, have we had any problem, I was gonna ask you before, I didn't mean to wait till you put the slide up. Have we had any problem with these manholes, slipping, lowering, elevation heights with them?
There, maybe a couple, no more than a handful that I've noticed, and that's one thing. When they do the Class 2 investigation, it's a comprehensive report. I mean, it's, okay, is the lid on properly? Is the frame that the lid is, on top of? Is that, what's the integrity of that? The steps that the worker could go up or down, are those, solid, or is someone gonna, potential to fall? And the manhole structures themselves, they're probably in like maybe 4-foot high segments. So you stack one on top of the other, one on top of the other. So if there may be some type of infiltration through one component to the other, then, that's another item that's identified and then looks to go and be corrected. We have frost. Do things heave? When things heave, do they break? And then, might that be a repair that needs to be made? So,
I appreciate it, thank you very much.
Okay.
We move on to item 10, review of revisions to the employee handbook by Manager Crow.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to turn this over to Attorney Sosnowski so she can, almost said Attorney Zito, sorry. Sosnowski, so she can go through, this has been, so, but I will lay, so myself, Director Bucus, and Deborah all met with Attorney Sosnowski, Roxanne, I think probably 10 weeks ago on this, and there have been these incorporated the changes that some of the state laws and some of the things we are anticipating. So with that, I will turn it over to Roxanne.
Thank you, Manager Crow. So what you have in front of you this evening is the 2019 amendments, the proposed amendments, City of Freeport Employee Handbook. You may recall that we recently amended the Employee Handbook back in 2018, and those changes were primarily to address the city manager form of government at that time, with some other tweaks in language changes that we saw that needed to be addressed. But we did not move forward with a whole-scale rewrite of the Employee Handbook at that time. And this set of changes that are before you will look to address some substantive sections that, in my opinion, I felt was worth bringing to your attention. To begin with, we've added a weapons policy. This is in response to concealed carry, which, as you're aware, probably aware, passed many years ago. At the time, the Illinois Municipal League sent to all member municipalities a model ordinance to adopt. We were unable to determine whether or not you adopted that ordinance, but I would recommend that that model ordinance be included in your employee handbook. So that's one of the amendments we have done here. Also, medical cannabis, again, with the approval of medical marijuana in the state of Illinois, the Illinois Municipal League, again, sent around a model ordinance for all member communities. This policy in the handbook is the Illinois Municipal League medical cannabis policy. With regard to specific changes to employment laws in 2019, we've revised your military policy. There was some changes to ISERA, which has now adopted USERA federal law as it relates to military leave, so we do need to make some changes to the handbook as it relates to ISERA. We've also added a provision for general employee reimbursement, and that is in response to a change in Illinois law that requires employers to reimburse employees for matters of which the employee has undertaken that may inure to the benefit of the employer. Now, what does that exactly mean? That I cannot tell you. That's what the statute says, and there's absolutely no case law or direction whatsoever for any of our communities as to exactly what the the municipalities are supposed to do with the language, but we have added it to the handbook. One of the questions that I've had asked from some of the communities is, does this mean that we have to pay for our employees' personal cell phones? And given the fact that they may use them on occasion for city business. And the Illinois Local Government Lawyers Association, of which I'm a part of, we had a discussion about that not long ago after the passage of this law, and we've come to the conclusion that, in our opinion, that type of limited use would not meet the statutory definition of inured to the benefit of. But that language is included now in the handbook. Also, changes to your lactation policy. There were changes to Illinois law as it relates to space for nursing mothers and lactation, so we have updated the handbook to address that. We've expanded language regarding outside employment. This is not a change in Illinois law. These are my recommendations as to what I see in employee handbooks that I've written for other communities. This would require the secondary employer to have work comp insurance, and also would allow us to receive a signed waiver form from the employee in the event that the secondary employment was approved. We've also included language to add NAVEX, your 1-800 reporting line, to the handbook in numerous places throughout the handbook, so that that information is readily available to an employee should they need to make a complaint. We've revised the section on pay. As you may recall, in 2018, the City of Freeport revised its ordinances as it relates to employee classifications for non-bargaining staff. We took out the specific pay classifications out of the ordinance, and so in the handbook, we've just created some general language indicating that an individual employee's pay will be determined at the time of hire unless otherwise established by a collective bargaining agreement. In the sick leave provision, I noticed that there was really no language dealing with abuse of sick leave. We do have some language regarding abuse of sick leave in our collective bargaining agreements, but we didn't have language in the employee handbook. So just a short little provision in there that gives the City of Freeport some rights in the event that we suspect that there's an abuse of sick leave issue. Holiday pay. A recommendation that I have made to the city manager, and one that actually he's seen in his previous communities as well, is the use of sick leave both before and after a holiday. Sometimes we see this happening in instances in which an employee may want to extend their holiday, but not necessarily have to use vacation time. So this provision would not authorize holiday pay in the event that there was use of sick time either before or after a holiday, the day immediately prior, or the day immediately before, and then the day after. And then finally, this employee handbook includes a complete revision of your drug and alcohol policy. Your drug and alcohol policy, as you're aware, is one that is a several strikes and you're out policy as opposed to a zero tolerance policy. I am recommending in the communities that I'm in to take a look at that, and at least to have some language that would allow an employer to look at either a suspension or a termination, even for a first-time offense. I believe that this language is important given the fact that there is a strong possibility that the state of Illinois will be moving forward with recreational marijuana in the future, and that this is something I think that you may want to take a look at. Again, this would be a change to the drug and alcohol policy only as it relates to your non-bargaining staff at present, but I know we've had discussions in the past about hopefully making changes in the employee handbook that we are then able to carry across to all of our groups or sets of employees, if you will. So the drug and alcohol policy it's lengthy. It includes many additional provisions than what was in your previous drug and alcohol policy. So that's one area where you may want to take a particular look at that and examine it. And that's just a quick, certainly willing to answer any questions you may have.
Peter?
How'd you guess? Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Actually, you covered a lot of the questions I had as to why on these policies. But the one that I'd like a little more clarification on is, could you run us through the drug and alcohol testing one? What would that look like under the proposed changes?
Sure. So under the proposed drug and alcohol policy, which you'll find on page 62, and then on forward, it talks about essentially setting up a zero tolerance as it relates to the use of drug and alcohol, with an exception in the event that someone is utilizing in performance of their duties, or in the event that someone has a prescription for a certain medication that they have to take, in which case that gets then reported obviously to the department supervisor. It lays out specific instances, 5 specific instances in fact, in which employees would be subject to testing: pre-employment, promotion to a higher classification, reasonable suspicion, which has a very specific definition. Special circumstances would be maybe if there was a regularly scheduled physical exam, if an officer has been involved in a major incident, such as a shooting. Again, that's state statute now, so we want to make sure that that is included. Also, when an officer is assigned to a departmental or outside drug enforcement group, and an employee is primarily assigned to drug enforcement responsibilities. Again, this particular language, though, would not have any effect on officers presently with the CBA, because they have their own drug and alcohol policy, but this would be for those non-bargaining staff. And then again, post-accidents would be a requirement for testing, either when there's been an accident or injury, and again, whether it was in a vehicle or with equipment. The policy in and of itself also sets up some protections for the employee as well, in the event that it makes sure that there's chain of custody procedures, and also in the event that there's a positive drug test result, that would be subject to a second confirmation test that then would be needed to be performed. The policy outlines specifically who the information will go to and how the testing results will be maintained, and also provides a statement that each employee will be provided with a copy of any and all information and reports received in connection with the testing and results, which is not something that we had in the policy in the past.
The one thing is, so the agency that is currently doing our testing automatically tests the sample if it comes back positive for a second test. So we get notifications when we get our positive back, where we're setting that it's been tested twice. So that's already in our, so that's not something new, which is now just codified in the handbook.
The policy also outlines what the process is for discipline. So for a positive test result, we have removed the language that would have laid out essentially steps. This is what happens after a first positive. This is what happens after a second positive. This is what happens after a third positive. Now what we have is, in the event that you test positive on both the initial and the confirmatory test for drugs or alcohol, you'll be subject to discipline up to and including termination, and that will be at the employer's discretion. It lays out what the policy is for refusal to provide samples. It lays out, in the event of an employee that has a drug-related conviction or an alcohol-related offense, that those are reportable instances, that despite the fact that they have occurred outside of your employment, that those do have to be reported to your employer. That's not something that we had a requirement on in the past, but that's what we've added here in this policy. There is language regarding EAP. In the event that we have an employee who comes forward on a self-initiated basis to request assistance for drug and alcohol, we've outlined that that will not result in negative action on behalf of the employer, but in fact that we will make sure that services are available. We want to encourage people to come forward if they need help. We want to make sure that we assist them in getting them the help that they need. The policy also outlines searches in the instance in which we may have to utilize the request utilization of the police department for searches. And then the last couple of lines are just the definitions that go along with the policy, as well as what the definition is for reasonable suspicion. If this policy is accepted and approved by the council, I would suggest that our department heads receive additional training on the drug and alcohol policy, including, and they probably already attend classes on the reasonable suspicion standard, but I would suggest that as well.
Question. Question, Alderman Burke. You mentioned here, now it'd be brand new, but all the employees presently would be required to follow it, is that correct?
Only non-bargaining staff.
Non-bargaining staff.
Correct, because your collective bargaining agreements with AFSCME, PBPA, and IAFF have their drug and alcohol policies already included in their CBAs.
So the ones that presently are not grandfathered out
That's correct. They would still be covered under the pre-existing policies.
Now, if they make, follow-up. Sure. If they make marijuana legal, does that cover that? It wouldn't change any of the process. Marijuana still is a drug, and it wouldn't change the policy then? Or is it covered in there?
No, it wouldn't change the policy because for the employees that, even the employees that are covered under our CBAs, they would be a category of employees that would not be able to utilize that and work under the types of, conditions that they have to work for, like police and fire, for example, employees that have CDLs. Even in the existing legislation that we have on the books right now for medical marijuana, those categories of employees are not eligible for that type of, they can't be registered qualifying patients.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Great job, Roxanne. So do we, is this an informational status at the moment, or is this a, you'd like to move it forward?
So I'd like to move it forward for adoption. Well, do we have to do this by resolution or ordinance? I forget how we did it the last time.
I
think it was
can't remember. I think we adopted the employee handbook by resolution, but I can double check and make sure that it's on the agenda appropriately.
So we'd like to move forward to the next council meeting and for adoption.
Make that motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
And a third and a fourth.
Either one, we got a motion and 2 seconds. Alderman Brashaw and Alderman McLanathan and Alderman Parker and Peter and Alderman Brashaw. She was shaking her head beforehand, so we'll give her credit for that because it's her birthday.
Yeah, there you go.
Happy birthday. Okay, so that's item, now we'll take the vote on it even. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Didn't need to do that, but we did it.
We're going to do a handoff of attorneys here. Roxanne's going to leave and Steve's going to take over, but his presentation is next up too, I believe.
Thank you. Our next item is going to be item number 11, which is a discussion on ordinance following Part 4 of Title 8 Vehicles in Operation, Chapter 480, Parking Generally, Section 480.16 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Freeport regarding commercial vehicles on residential driveways and properties. At the February 4th meeting, Committee of the Whole, motion was made by Alderman Clem, amended the ordinance move forward to the regular scheduled Committee of the Whole meeting, seconded by Alderman Bradshaw. Presented by Legal Counsel, Mr. Cox.
The one thing is, all of you should have received the copy of the new modified ordinance. We realized that that after reviewing this weekend, there were some changes we need to make, so you should have that copy.
Go ahead.
Right, so what you have in front of you is a revised ordinance based on the requests from the council last week's meeting. Specifically, we've increased that gross vehicle weight rating from 10,000 to 16,000 pounds, which is the maximum amount which is operable by a Class D licensee, which is the standard class for most of us that don't have a CDL. Also added language regarding the parking of construction equipment, that sort of thing. And then had a carve out, and you'll see in subsection E on page 3 here, there's a carve out for RVs or pull behind travel trailers, which are, many of them are going to exceed even the 16,000. And the construction, as part of the addition of the construction vehicle, there's a carve out there for construction vehicles used in connection with a validly issued permit. In other words, if you've got an excavator at a site or something like that and it's actively being used on a current permit, they don't have to drive it out of there every night. So it can stay in there, and that's just a practical exception there. That's pretty much the sum total of the changes. did a little bit more because there were a lot of questions regarding the weight rating, and that's not something that's intuitive to most of us in terms of what types of vehicles fall in those different categories. So having taken a look at that, what you run into is, what we have now is up to 10,000 pounds. That's considered a light-duty vehicle, according to the Federal Highway Administration. And that's a Class 1 and 2 according to them. Then a Class 3 goes from 10,000 to 14,000 pounds, and a Class 4 goes from 14,000 to 16,000 pounds. And those are deemed medium-duty. Once you start getting over the 10,000 pounds, you start getting into box trucks and that sort of thing. So you can get into some pretty large vehicles. The question was asked about the 1-ton trucks, I believe at the last meeting. You can get over 10,000 pounds with those. It requires one of the Super Duty trucks, but you will run into that. So the 10,000 would potentially prohibit some of those. So again, I think the direction of this council was to push that up towards the 16,000, see what that looks like. And that's what you have in front of you.
Steve, go ahead now.
Well, one thing that came up to me, and I talked to a couple people in Section C about a seasonal vehicle like a small fishing boat. Just in my neighborhood alone, there's quite a few, and during the summer months, we park it in our driveway. I'm one of them, I'm included. But in the winter months, it's put away. This here, under Section C, would almost state that that's illegal. And I would like to see if we could add or change it to a seasonal vehicle like summertime. You can have a fishing boat or something in there. Because several of my neighbors are, including myself. So that's something that just came up just this week, or we should have come up a couple weeks ago.
Well, and I think that's a fair consideration. You could address that by some sort of language. It gets a little bit dicey in the interpretation, but you could go to something like, you use the term seasonal, seasonally appropriate, or seasonal use, that sort of language. I'd have to scratch my head a little bit and try to figure that out, but it can be done. And if that's something the council wants to do, I can certainly make that.
Sure.
I would like to see it.
Excuse me, but, Chair,
Sure.
but since you brought up seasonal, that can also include snowmobiles and wave runs.
Sure. And that's exactly the sort of thing I think that would be. So you would have, for example, you would have maybe snowmobiles on a trailer during the winter, but they're not going to be parked there all summer. So you move those out and bring your wave runners in.
Yeah.
But this is a difficult ordinance to deal with. So I think that those considerations they're valid. I mean, they're things that people are using their driveways for. So the question is, do you make them move them around back, because that's what this does. So any trailers have to be parked in the buildable area of the backyard or in the garage. So if you don't carve that exception out, you do run into having to write a ticket to somebody for having their boat in the driveway. So I think those are all valid considerations.
Anybody else? Steve and I talked a little bit about this afternoon, because I went out to one of the dealerships, because I had somebody come to me and say, hey, that's almost getting to where I can't park my 1-ton dually in my driveway that I drive every day. So I went out and got some actual figures on it, and Steve and I talked, and then Steve came back with some pictures, which I think if we passed on would really help. But the magic thing in here is about, for example, if you got a dually with a diesel, it's 13,000 pounds. That's under the 16,000, but here becomes a problem. At about 13,500 or 14,000 pounds, you can park one of the city's small dump trucks out in front of your house. Or you can park a nice big box truck out in front of your house. So those, I think, are things that we kind of got to take a look at. I mean, it's going to be easy for us to do. We can look at it and say yay or nay, but we don't want to pin it down to where we're leaving this group of vehicles in there that you're just going to have to come back and kind of chase down afterward. The 16,000 pounds, as Attorney Cox said, that's a definite C plate or D plate or something that says, the police officer comes up and says, boom, okay, that's out of sync, you know. Now, Chief, basing on kind of like what I just said, what are your thoughts, or if I could, I mean, you know.
Sure. We'd kind of talked about this being more of a kind of a nuisance type of a call instead of maybe a law enforcement, since they are on private property and they're not parked on the roadway.
Yeah, good pass off, thank you. No, I appreciate it, because we did talk about that, my fault. Go ahead, Andrew. You would?
Yeah, much like when we get any nuisance complaint, unless it's something completely run-of-the-mill like overgrown lawn or at this time of year, you know, snow or ice not being cleared on the sidewalks, there's always at least a little bit of research, at least in the ordinance or otherwise, that needs to happen before we issue the warning or issue the violation. So having to look up the gross vehicle curb weight of a particular vehicle wouldn't really be that abnormal from our general scope of duties. It's just making sure that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed when we're writing a warning or
Sure.
issuing a violation.
I think really, Steve, the sheet that you had that listed that other category, it was a category 1, a category 2, and then this category 3 was kind of where all these off-breeds, so to speak, showed up in there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Steve, that's where I had the problem too, is that 12,000 to 16,000 pound area. We're trying to avoid some of these construction vehicles in the driveways and on the street that some people are purchasing properties or renting them out and having several work guys live there and parking them up and down the street and blocking people's view and blocking access to other parking areas. This is kind of where I got started in this whole mess, trying to figure out if we could do a restriction. I have no problem with people having fishing boats in their driveway. I had a tenant once that had a sailboat that they made move a few years ago, and he was very angry with me. And then he started driving a little Debbie truck, and they told him he couldn't park that in his driveway either. So I don't know what ordinance they were referring to at that time, but I have constituents that want to keep their work trailers in the driveway, and then I have other constituents that don't want all those dump trucks up and down the street. So we're trying to find that medium here. If it's 14,000 or 16,000, I am a little worried though about small dump trucks, as Alderman Clem has brought up. So, I mean, would it be horrible to say construction vehicles, or is that kind of a loose term as well?
You could certainly define it that way. You know, vehicles designed for use primarily in construction trades, something along those lines. Right now, the on-street ordinance, we do have a parking ordinance for on-street parking, and that talks about 3/4 ton trucks and passenger vans up to 1 ton. So by going to the 16,000 pounds, we're greatly increasing, because I set that up, you'll notice in the ordinance, it's across the board, so on the street or so it's just in residential districts. So you're greatly increasing what people can park on street. Now, that's mitigated somewhat by that ordinance. I think was in '77. It was drafted-ish. Not sure I have that in front of me actually right now, but it was drafted a long time ago. And what we define as passenger trucks are a lot bigger now. It's just it's you know, if you had a 1-ton truck in 1977, that was a big thing. Not many people had those. Now they're much more commonplace, and those can go over 10,000. The dicey part, I think, is when you start getting into that 13, 14, 15,000. So one thing you could do is say, okay, well, you can go up to 14,000 because that's a class 1, 2, or 3 according to the Federal Highway Administration. Tom, to your point, I wanted to mention I had a little bit of time between the time I got here and I stepped up, so I utilized that by spending some time on Wikipedia and just taking a look at, well, what do we get into with these different classes? The problem you run into, and I would encourage everybody to do their own digging around. There's some good charts. The problem you get into is with any vehicle, it depends on how it's outfitted. So you could get a Ford F-350 that is 6,500 pounds GVWR, or you could get one that's, 11,000. I mean, it just depends on how that particular package is put together. So, you get into dump trucks. You could get a very small dump truck that falls under that 16,000. Most don't, but you could run into that situation, as well as box trucks and the Little Debbie trucks, the delivery type style vehicles. And, clearly that's not what you want parked in driveways, but, when you're defining by weight class, that's the sort of thing you get into. Otherwise, you get back to, defining for what is personal use. And that becomes difficult when people are driving vehicles for work or otherwise. So the idea of using the gross vehicle weight rating is still attractive in that it makes code enforcement's job a whole lot easier.
So that's one of the things, just a reminder, council, we had the discussions as we went forward about making sure that we talk about construction vehicles, that we're not also talking, we don't group in the vehicles for the guys that are the plumbers or the workers or the HVAC guys that take their vehicles home, so they're weekend on call. From a city manager point of view, here's what happens is if we don't have it clearly defined, what happens is then we get a ticket written by community development nuisance, and then it comes up and to me to be adjudicated because before it goes up to administrative, because there's not a clearly defined and there's an interpretation as it goes forward. The clearer we can lay it out for community development and nuisance, the easier it is before we go to the administrative hearing. And plus, the administrative judge has a very easier time. So when we round it into say a general construction vehicle versus weight, that becomes then an interpretation, and you may even get a different interpretation between the code enforcement supervisor and the nuisance inspector, and that's where we start getting problems within giving out nuisance inspection.
So just to tag on to that, I think basically what the moral of the story, I think, is we're sacrificing a little bit of, for the sake of ease of enforcement, we're sacrificing just a little bit of fairness in that process.
Chair.
Go ahead.
I haven't heard anything about a truck parked on the street with a trailer attached to it. Would that be combined weight?
It's a great question.
Then they just hook it.
I think that would be treated separately. Now, for the vehicle code, they're combined.
Right.
There's a whole complex thing there, but for purposes of this ordinance, I think that the trailer would just need to be street legal to be on the street. If it was going to be in a driveway, well, the trailer would need to be in the back, unless it was seasonally appropriate under the new amendments. So you really couldn't park a trailer attached to a vehicle or not in your driveway under this draft. But the street's a different thing. That's vehicle code.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to get a consensus of the council that we want Mr. Cox to look into the seasonal vehicles. I think it's good, but we need a consensus of the council to have him do that.
Mr. Chair. Everybody okay? Yeah. I think we're okay there. You can take a look at it and write up something on it. We can take a look at it. If we need to alter something on it, that's not a problem. I think one of the things, while Jim had spoke before and we were hearing, and Art brought up about the trailers, wasn't the original intent of this also some of the construction trailers and stuff that are around? So maybe you could speak on that.
So when we looked at this was and we were trying to find that. Steve and I spent many hours hashing back and forth. And so this was directly established. So trailers that are large size, such as the construction trailers that are brought onto a work site, or that we find that are parked in people's driveways, the large ones are on the streets. The other thing is trailers outside of the everyday use, what I mean everyday use is when you talk about the camper trailers, the trailers you talked about, seasonal vehicles, because we have gotten some complaints about trailers that are towed behind for use as a business. And it may be seasonal, but they're still a business. People, trailers that may be taken to amusement parks to sell food, or to fairs to sell food, or what's that? Cheese market. Cheese markets, parks there's right there in business, so they don't take theirs things along that line. So that was what we did when we approached this. We were trying to find that cutoff, and what we had originally talked about was those vehicles that required a CDL, but that was tougher to call out. So that's why we went with the weight, and I will say that we will, depending on what you decide, we may have to change some zoning ordinances out of this. I don't know, because so that was initially what people were cited under as we go forward. So that was the real direction here, is to keep the construction trailers basically so that residents are not running full construction businesses out of their residential homes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Bradshaw.
I'll give this one to him. He's been waiting.
Sure. Go ahead, Pat.
This whole thing has just kind of got me a little uneasy. I mean, we're trying to regulate how people can use their driveways, and having to store stuff in buildable areas behind, if you can't get, I've got a buildable area behind my garage, but I can't get to it because my house is too close to the garage, and I got 2 properties on the side of me. And also, if I got something over, a trailer that's over 8-9 feet tall, I'm gonna have to, in order to follow this ordinance, I'd have to build a garage to park it in. Well, I'd get into the zoning restriction where the garage I'm building is too tall for that zoning. So we got to look into, we'd have to look into changing that too, because what I looked to zoning, what is the height restriction on a garage in a residential area?
So there is a process to go through that, and we have, they come up from the Zoning Board of Appeals to ask for a variance as they go forward. And we have at least one that I am aware of, maybe 2 within the last 2 years, who is building a garage to place their business trucks inside. One I think one was an RV and one was a truck, a business truck. And so they came forward and asked for a use variance, a variance for the height, so that they could go forward and build that. And that was approved not only by the zoning, but by this council.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Follow up on that.
Sure.
But, if I go spend so much money on a camping trailer and I want to store it, and my neighbors say, no, I don't want a garage that big next to me, I've got, there I got to go find money somewhere else to store it or something, or get rid of it. That's just my opinion.
But I won't. Go ahead, Pat.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. I feel your pain with that. I've dealt with so many complaints with business trucks parked in driveways, dump trucks, carny trailers, as the one person calls it. A lot of people with business vehicles, boats, motorhomes, all that kind of thing. A lot of us that have those toys, my husband has a toy, he has a boat, will only park it in the driveway a couple days a year in between storage, because you pay for summer storage and then you pay for winter storage. And there are some people that bring their fishing boats home every day. So no matter what we do, we're not going to make everyone happy here. I know that for a fact, and as aldermen, there is no way to make everyone happy in Freeport. So we're looking at the amount of complaints we get, and we're trying to make as many people happy as possible without making all the other ones mad when we actually make a new legislative decision here. I would like to see this move forward with the seasonal carve-outs for the fishing boats, wave runners, snowmobiles on a trailer, and set that classification for sure of the 1, 2, or 3. The 4, I'm still a little iffy about. That's the over 14,000 and under 16,000 pounds, I believe. I think we could solve most of this, and also with the carve-out for the motorhomes. I'm not sure if I covered everybody's bases here, everybody that had their individual complaints, but I think that we could satisfy most of the complaints at this time. Am I correct?
So I just want to make sure I got the weight right. 14,
Class 1, 2, and 3,
so
up to 14.
14, up to 14. So we lower back down the 16 to 14.
Does that sound compliant enough for what you were all
That matches with what I think our Steve and my discussions were, but I'll rely.
Yeah, I think that that would be a reasonable adjustment, based on the concerns I've heard. And to address Alderman Busker's concerns, I think what you were describing there, most, if not all of the scenarios where that would become an issue for personal use really is already covered. Because if we're talking about doing that seasonal use carve-out, that's going to be the toys, right? That's going to be the jet skis and the boat and the snowmobiles in the winter. So that's covered. The pop-up campers, the RVs, those are already carved out in the existing draft from the last meeting. So really what you're left with are the construction trailers and the trailers that are used primarily in conjunction with business, which ought to be in a commercial or manufacturing district. If there's anything else that comes up, or you think of anything else, which maybe we ought to look at as a carve-out, I could certainly throw that in there for the council to consider, whether it's moved forward or not tonight. But what I'm hearing and what I've taken for notes here, is to try to encapsulate the conversation, is that we'll have the ordinance as it stands, except we'll bring that 16 down to 14, which is classes 1, 2, and 3, and for personal seasonal use. And I think using not in conjunction with a trade or business is important there, because if it is used in conjunction with a trade or business, now you just opened up a whole another thing, and that's where you run into where we're really getting the complaints. So I think I can tie that up. Again, it's not going to be an exact science, and we are sacrificing a little bit of finesse for the sake of enforceability, ease of enforceability, but I think it's a pretty good trade-off here, and I think the council has, it's been a good discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Alderman Buster.
Just one, we were talking about it, just kind of popped in my head. When we're looking at this, what are we going to consider as the seasonal cutoffs for each individual thing?
Well, that gets back to the finesse, I think. I think the language is going to have some level of interpretive nuance, and I think that's going to be pretty easy to tell, right? If somebody's got a hot dog trailer parked in their yard, well, that's probably not personal seasonal use. You're selling hot dogs. If Alderman Parker has a boat sitting in his yard that still has some fishing rods in it and some things like that, well, that's probably personal use. So there's going to be a little bit of interpretation there, and I'm sure we can figure out something that's going to be right on that gray line, and I'm sure somebody will, and we'll have to deal with that. But short of absolutely forbidding or absolutely allowing, we're going to wind up with a gray line, right? So the first ordinance, I guess I would mention the first ordinance I presented was that bright line, and through the discussions we've had, you see what that does. It's, oh man, well, it picks this up and it picks this up, and we don't want to. So I think we're painting a little bit of gray line there, but that's okay.
Anyone else? Director Andrew, are you okay with this?
Yeah, good. We can make that work.
Mr. Chair, do we need a motion to move this
Yes,
to
would you
the
like to
next?
make a motion based upon what you said?
I would like to move this to the next council meeting, regularly scheduled council meeting.
Second.
And with the alterations that have been noted, so we can come back to us, and if we need to alter something, we can. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we'll see that back next Monday. Thank you very much, Attorney Cox. Number 12, discussion regarding ordinance amending fence provisions, presented by Community and Economic Development.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the background on this will go back to September 2018 when the city adopted the new solar energy systems ordinance. One of the aims of that was to streamline solar development in the city. As a part of that streamlined development process, small and mid-scale ground mount solar arrays were added as a permitted use in the business zone districts, and all types of ground mount solar arrays are now a permitted use in our manufacturing zone districts. As we've been going through the permitting process of the first solar projects that are utilizing that new solar ordinance as staff, we found in our zoning ordinance that any fence in a manufacturing, business, or professional zone district must be approved in conjunction with a variance as of right now. In many instances, fencing will be ancillary to ground mount solar installation and is often going to be an insurance requirement for those ground mount solar arrays. Additionally, in the city's adopted 2011 National Electrical Code requires the circuitry of photovoltaic modules with maximum system voltages greater than 30 volts, which is going to be just about any solar array to be made not readily accessible. Plus, the Illinois Solar Energy Association, some of the industry standards, notes owners of ground mount systems have a vested interest in making sure the system's secure, and they recommend up to an 8-foot fence as an appropriate solution in most cases. And because the intent of our new solar energy systems ordinance was to streamline that development process, we've realized it's kind of counterintuitive to permit ground mount systems in business and manufacturing zoning districts, but then require a variance for the fence, which will almost always need to be installed around the solar energy system in those instances. The proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance removes the requirement of a variance for fences in business, professional, and manufacturing zone districts, but it restricts the construction of fences in FEMA-defined regulatory floodways and floodplains where fences are subject to additional state and federal requirements.
So now could you tell us what you said, Andrew?
Common terminology.
Chair? Yes.
I can sum it up real quickly.
Thank you.
So, our solar ordinance, we adopted to streamline it. What we found was our solar, that in order to meet the requirements for our electrical code for solar, fences have to be installed around solar units. Solar, basically in industrial areas and manufacturing areas. So we have to change, and our current ordinance requires variances to be to install fences. So in order to make everything clean, we want to change our fencing ordinance so that in manufacturing, which are the large solar sites, they can, but manufacturing, they can put fences up with the exception of areas that are designated as floodways and floodplains, which then we have to meet the requirements as placed by IDNR, which requires a variance and approval for a pass-through fence, basically a chain link fence in those areas, where they still have to come back and get a variance and approval for it. Hopefully that summed it up.
Sure, but only in, not, what about residential? That's
No, this is
commercial.
commercial and.
Would you like me to address
Yep.
it? Yeah. So the way, right now, there's the residential fence ordinance stays pretty much intact. So, and we have that. There's what you're seeing in front of you is effectively our residential fencing ordinance. For some reason, and you can see in the lineouts with the edits that you've received, we have this this defined set of rules for residential, and then threw in at the end that, well, but if it's in a business or an industrial district, it's always a variance. So theoretically, if you put in a little 2-foot-high garden fence in a business district, you had to come in for a variance for that. And I think it was well-intentioned. It was probably meant to create, you know, a bit more flexibility. But what you have in front of you simply just wipes out that variance requirement and says, well, we've got fence rules, follow them wherever you are. And as Andrews pointed out, there is a specific change to the policy with respect to flood zones. Right. But basically, you just have to prove that you meet all the requirements there before we let you do anything.
Yeah, so the water can run through.
Yes, exactly.
Not
Sure.
stopping the flow.
Sure. Alderman Glanton?
All right, so we've still got the 4-foot height requirement though, and for the front yards, it says, and then 6 feet for, no, it says 4, and then 6 feet on rear and side.
Yes.
So across the board, whether residential or commercial business, you can get 4 or 6, depending on whether it's designated a front or a side.
If you want higher than that, then you'll need the variance.
Okay. So your 8-foot language that you're talking about there is gonna still require variance.
Yeah, that's the industry guidelines for solar. They recommend up to an 8-foot fence. So if somebody doing a large-scale solar wants an 8-foot fence around their development in Freeport, then they need to have a variance to get the 8-foot fence.
But it's not required for the solar, and it's up to an 8-foot fence, so they can still say a 6-foot fence for security fencing.
Yeah, that's just an industry recommendation. They're not obligated to follow that.
Well, and one thing I would point out as well is that's only in the required yards. So you can have a higher fence if you're in your buildable area. So if you're within the required yard, that you're getting into the obstruction language. So if you look at in subsection D there in fences in front yards, talks about fences are allowed within a required front yard setback area, and no fence over 4 feet in height should be permitted within the required front yard setback area. So what that says is you can go back, if you're in your buildable area, that height restriction doesn't necessarily apply for residential or anywhere else.
Oh, sure. What was, I get the rationale for not wanting the variance, but what was the logic behind the prior requirement that it be a variance? I assume there was a reason behind it.
So,
what was that?
Yeah, we looked at it, and as near as we can say, the ordinance was put in at the same time the city adopted their floodway ordinance.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that, honestly. What I think it was maybe meant to do was just provide a little bit more flexibility and or oversight to those properties in business or manufacturing districts, because there's going to, you know, every one of those is going to be somewhat unique, particularly in manufacturing. You'll have different. It's the only thing I could really figure. I couldn't figure out a really solid, currently applicable scenario that was meant to cover. I mean, just making something a variance across the board, you might as well just prohibit it, because you could come in for a variance to get beyond the prohibition.
Sure.
Yeah, I was a little bit stumped by that, and frankly surprised by the fact that it existed. That just came up when this permit came through.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Follow-up, Alderman Bradshaw.
Thank you. So this only applies in the city of Freeport. This doesn't apply, say, out at Albertus.
No. It would just be within the limits.
Follow up.
Sure.
How about around our old city water sewer treatment plant? Would we need a fencing area there?
That would be probably a code question. I know that the fence becomes invoked for the solar farms. That's any National Electrical Code invokes that. So as far as the water and the water treatment, I'm not sure. That would be as I said, health and safety code sort of provision.
One more follow-up. I was just wondering if we were obligated to have fences put up for some of the contracts that we've already agreed to, say around the dump sites, the water, sewer, et cetera.
Well, so here, so they are gonna put up a fence around the site, where the solar, around the landfill, but we already have, we basically have the area. And I think they're gonna, Keystone's gonna be putting up a site, the fence around, around the site where they have the,
On the west side of Hampton.
west side, yeah. So they are, both of them are gonna be, though, putting up a, chain link fence as we go forward.
One more thing. Thank you. I hope you understand, I'm not looking for problems. I'm just trying to look for solutions in case we find out that, you know, we are violating that by already having these contracts come forward, and I don't want to have the city have to cover the cost of building a fence. So, I want to make sure it was,
The fence is within their contracts
Okay.
that we have with
that's
both,
good.
both agencies. In fact, the one out at the landfill, that was, they would not go into that site unless they were able to maintain the fence and the access into that area.
Okay, just to keep this real simple, okay? There's, hasn't been an ordinance in history beat up as bad as a fence ordinance over the number of years that I've been here. Every time somebody wanted something, they got something put in or something taken out. Now, in this, I'm just gonna ask a couple simple questions. Does a person have to put a fence around solar?
I think almost always the answer is going to be yes, unless it's a residential application. But if it's a community solar or utility scale, the answer is yes. If it's you know, a very small ground mount, probably not.
Okay.
That's a code question.
Okay. And the second, pulling out a bunch of the restrictions as we have in some of this stuff, does this give a commercial manufacturer or something the authorization to put up a fence without a permit or willy-nilly, or, you know, so to speak?
So this was not intended as a comprehensive pass on the fence ordinance. We'll touch that. All this does is it takes the requirement of a variance out of commercial and manufacturing. So really, without, in all seriousness, without consideration as to the other provisions, that wasn't the intent of doing this. It was simply to remove the requirement of the variance in those two districts and to address the flooding issue. I guess that was plugged in there, but that was just a matter of convenience. So, you know, in terms of granting or taking authority away, it really doesn't. It doesn't attempt to address that sort of thing. It just says that if you're in a business district or you're in a manufacturing district, you have to abide by the same rules as the residential people do. Or get a variance.
Still be required to come in, and I'm not asking a question, I'm saying to the council.
Sure, no.
They would still have to be required to come in and pull a building permit to put up a fence, which then would be inspected by our building inspector as we go out.
Any other questions? You'd like to see this at the next council meeting? We have a motion to
So moved.
move forward.
So moved.
Patrick moves, who second? Second. Art seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Do we have any public comments? Is there anybody that'd like to make Tommy tag?
I want to tell Joey Westfall happy birthday. And we want to sing happy birthday to you.
Oh, no.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sally. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Tommy.
That's the benefit of being born on the 4th of July. I don't have to have that. It's a holiday. Anything else to come before the council? We thank you, department heads and you gentlemen, for coming forward. We always appreciate it. Thanks for the expertise and the figures on the the budget items and stuff coming forward. Thank you guys for everything. I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Cow meeting.